the Chp Association. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm your moderator, Alexandra Reckis, Senior Research Associate with the Alliance for Industrial Efficiency. A little bit about the Alliance. We are a growing coalition of businesses, labor groups, and nonprofit organizations who work to improve energy efficiency in the U.S. industrial sector, especially through the use of combined heat and power and waste heat to power. Our agenda today has three key parts. First, Lisa Jacobson, President of the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, will discuss findings from the 2017 Sustainable Energy in America Fact Book. That will be followed by a panel discussion with our three expert panelists, Gil Amengual, Director of Marketing and Product Strategy for Solar Turbines, Richard Meyer, Director of Energy Analysis and Standards from the American Gas Association, and Winnie Warner, Manager of External Relations from the Chp Association. Now, I'd like to introduce Dale Lauda, the Executive Director of the Chp Association, to say a few words about our co-host at his organization.
Thank you. I just wanted to focus on two things. We have a slide that talks a little bit about us. Our main goal, at Chp Association, is to increase the amount of Chp in the marketplace. So we can talk a little bit about that. There'll be some questions I know about that. But I did want to highlight two things that might be of interest to some of you on the phone, and we'd love to hear questions, comments, if you want to email us afterwards. One is a event on May 23rd in New York. We're going to have a hospitality, Chp in the hospitality industry event. It's going to be co-sponsored with National Grid, NYSERDA, which is the New York Energy Office, and NECHP, which is the Northeast Clean Heat and Power Initiative. And like I said, it's going to focus on the hospitality industry and ways that they can use Chp. And we'd love to hear from you if you'd like to attend, or you'd like to participate or sponsor or anything. Just, I think there's an email, my email address and Winnie's email address are both on the slide somewhere, so please let us know. And the other thing I wanted to just mention very quickly is we'd also love to have your support and interest in and involvement in a study that we're doing to look at the resilience and somehow to quantify the resilience, reliability of Chp. We know it's valuable, and we're trying to help show that. We have a study that we're undertaking with with Navigant, and we'd like to be able to show all the great values of that Chp has. So if you'd like to have more information about that, let us know that too. So thank you very much, and back to you.
Great, thanks, Dale. I will now pass it over to Lisa to introduce the Business Council and walk us through the fact book findings. And I just wanted to mention that if questions come up from the audience, please click on the Q&A button at the top of your screen, and you can write your questions there, and we will take questions at the end of the webinar. Thanks.
The Business Council for Sustainable Energy is very pleased to be doing this webinar. This is the second webinar we've done focused on the Chp findings for the Sustainable Energy in America Fact Book. And I'm going to walk through some of the national findings and then talk through some of the Chp-specific findings, and hopefully that will be a good foundation for our moderated discussion and then questions. And it's been a few minutes, so I'll remind everybody, if you do have questions during the presentation, please go to the Q&A function up on the top of the webinar screen and put your question in there. The Business Council for Sustainable Energy is a coalition of companies and trade associations from the energy efficiency, natural gas, and renewable energy sectors. We are celebrating our 25th year, and we have worked over that period of time in many different settings, but with a focus on policy advocacy and education to help expand markets for important technologies like combined heat and power. Here is a quick snapshot of our current membership. It is very wide-ranging in terms of companies that provide different technology services, as well as utilities, public power, equipment manufacturers, project developers, very deep set of players in the supply chain for the U.S. energy sector. If you're interested in more information about the Sustainable Energy in America Fact Book, please check out the website. There's a lot of materials on here. They're all for free. You could get different videos, different graphics, the full fact book. We also have technology quick fact sections, and we have some state spotlight sections. And new this year, we've compiled all the slides that relate to energy infrastructure, and we put them in one place, so you can go there. So I hope you take an opportunity to look at the website and you find the materials useful. The fact book is produced each year with the support of a number of our members as well as some outside funders. So I just wanted to take a moment and thank all the funders for the 2017 edition, and look forward to working with all of them in the year to come. I'm going to start the presentation with a review of some of the highlights. The fact book, in many ways, looks at data sets for the last several decades and then also year on year. And some of the big picture punchlines for 2017 were clearly energy productivity, some of the record-breaking advancements in renewable energy technologies, natural gas. This was the first year natural gas became we became a net exporter of natural gas. We also started to see a deepening of trends that we've been tracking over the last 5 years, as well as in some cases over the last several decades. And I think one important thing is that we see energy efficiency, renewable energy, and natural gas really as the growth sectors of the clean energy economy. And then finally, we really wanted to drill down on the economics, and we have some new data sets that have some very bold statements about how the changes in our energy system are impacting consumers and what they see in terms of household energy spending. The first slide I want to talk about relates to energy productivity. And if you look here, you can see, and this is one of the data sets that go back a number of decades, you can see that the amount of energy we use as a country to produce a unit of GDP has really fallen. And we've seen a decoupling in terms of our economic growth and with energy consumption. And this point, runs counterintuitive to a lot of the way people have been thinking about how we can spur economic growth. So when you look at the data set, you can see here clearly that we can grow the economy and we can eliminate energy waste, and clearly combined heat and power can help us do a lot more to advance the U.S. energy productivity. In terms of changes to our electricity generation mix, there have been a lot of change in the last decade. I think you can start from the top. We've seen renewable energy about a decade ago at 8%, and this is including hydropower. And as we finished 2016, we were at 15%. So a big change in a short amount of time. Then if we go to natural gas, we also see some significant changes. Back in 2007, natural gas provided 22% of the fuel for our electricity generation, and at the end of 2016, it was at 34%. Nuclear power continues to be kind of a steady state technology, and we closed the year at about 20% of U.S. generation, so not a big change from 2007. And then for coal generation, it was almost 50% in 2007, but we ended 2016 at coal contributing 30%. So these are very significant changes over a short period of time. We also thought it would be interesting to look and see what has been built in the United States in the last decade or more. And as you can see from this chart, the blue represents renewable energy capacity build. The gray represents natural gas. We see a little red in 2016 with nuclear. But if you go back almost to, the late 1990s, what's really dominated in terms of electric generating capacity build has been renewables and natural gas. And over the last 25 years, 92% has been natural gas or renewable energy projects. So when we think about the changes underway in that snapshot slide of our generation mix, and we think about what's being built, these are structural changes and are not likely to be reversed. While these changes have been made, we've been making significant greenhouse gas emissions reduction. On the left-hand side, you can see that U.S. greenhouse gas emissions are at their lowest in 25 years, 12% below 2005 levels. And as you'll recall, 2005 levels is the baseline for many policies that have been developed, whether it be the Paris Agreement or the previous administration's Clean Power Plan. And interestingly, when you just look at the power sector, at the end of 2016, we were about 80% to the Clean Power Plan's goals on a national basis. Obviously, on a state and regional basis, there's a lot more diversity. But the shifts we've been making to become more energy productive, to use more renewable energy and natural gas, all have been paying dividends, and we are making significant reductions in our greenhouse gas and carbon emissions. Wanted to take a couple of minutes and just focus on technology costs. This is a levelized cost of electricity chart, unsubsidized, looking at a variety of technologies in the U.S. marketplace. And BNEF puts this together looking at real projects. And when you see these bands, those are the range of costs. And when you see the areas where there's overlap, that shows competition and economic competitiveness between technologies. So I think the big takeaway from this chart is that there are many technologies that fall with either in the range or where the diamonds are, and there are a lot of choices. CHP clearly is very competitive in certain parts of the country when you look at this particular chart. I wanted to talk for a second about power prices. If you see from the left, we're looking at wholesale power prices, and over the last decade, we've seen a dramatic dip in wholesale power prices. This isn't too surprising. We've seen, costs coming down for a number of renewable energy technologies. We've also seen very low and stable natural gas prices, so that has contributed to the wholesale power price. And you'll note that in all regions, we are well below the 2008 peak. For retail power prices, the price signal there is a little more muted because, as you'll know, there are many other items that go into a retail bill. But nonetheless, too, there have been some significant reductions over time, and it's interesting to think about, especially from a CHP perspective, why there might be some regional differences and why we don't see as deep a dive as we do with wholesale power prices. But now taking it more to a household level, what are consumers experiencing? The 2017 fact book showed a very bold finding that consumers have not paid less as a portion of their household income on energy since records have been started, and that's in the late 50s. So consumers are paying just under 4% in their percentage of household spend that goes to energy, and that relates to transportation as well as electricity and natural gas. So as we are making all these changes and we are making investments, consumers are not bearing the brunt of those investments in a significant way. So this was a very bold finding and one that certainly is a conversation piece. Briefly, in the global context, just wanted to show, looking at a number of clean energy technologies, renewables, and a number of smart energy technologies according to BNEF's definition. U.S. continues to be, number 2 in terms of clean energy investment. We are second to China, but this is a large global marketplace. And, in looking at the dip between 2015 and 2016, there's been a lot of discussion at our different briefings on why we see that. And part of it is because some of the cost reductions that are coming into different technologies, because the output is largely the same. So we're trying to get a little more precise, but some of it is due to the fact that costs have come down, so you get the same amount of output for a lower investment. Next, looking at energy prices among some of our competitors in the global marketplace, you'll see the U.S. in the blue line. We are very competitive when it comes to energy pricing, and we hope that CHP and other technologies that focus on the industrial sector can really take advantage of this comparative advantage. Corporate players continue to get involved in energy management and energy procurement, and this is just showing some of the different sectors that are involved in renewable energy procurement and energy efficiency. And I think this is also something that CHP providers are looking out to and hopefully can play a larger role with those that are trying to reduce energy costs, reduce emissions, and also, just become a more productive operation. So looking at some of the CHP section charts, I just want to start with, kind of where we are from a CHP build perspective. You'll see that there was, a decline from 2014 to 2015. I know we're going to talk a little bit about that in the Q&A, so I'll let my commentary, be held so we can hear from some of the experts on that. But I think it's really important to note that CHP is still contributing about 9% of total generation, and that's expected to continue. In terms of looking at different system sizes and different technologies, you can see that the average CHP system size continued to fall in 2015. Installations for both large systems and small ones failed to match the level seen in 2014, and again, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And while gas turbines are still the preferred technology for CHP build, its numbers of installations have dropped. Also, looking at the fuel source and the sector, natural gas continues to dominate. Biomass took a little bit more of a role in the past year that we looked at, and then the industrial sector continues to be a very large player in this space, followed by commercial. And then in terms of financing, it's important to note that steam turbines, industrial combustion engines, and gas combustion turbines remain the cheapest to build, and the price range of microturbines has continued to tighten. So you can see here the capital cost of CHP by technology on the right and asset financing for CHP on the left. So I'm going to stop there and turn it back to Alex and look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Lisa. So I want to say a few words about some findings from the Alliance for Industrial Efficiency. Last fall, we released a report that ranks all 50 states for their potential to reduce carbon emissions through industrial energy efficiency, including through increased CHP and waste heat to power deployments. And we found that if every state installs an economically reasonable portion of its technical potential for new CHPs, U.S. industrial sector customers would save over $140 billion on their electricity bills from 2016 to 2030 in total. And this would result in over 180 million megawatt hours of annual electric savings and about 33 million tons in annual carbon emission reductions in 2030 as well. So what this tells me is that even though the fact book does show a drop-off in CHP deployments in 2015, as Lisa talked about, there's still a great potential remaining for a CHP deployment across the country, which would result in these huge energy emissions and cost savings. And the Alliance has called on policymakers to address this deployment potential gap through policy to help reduce upfront capital costs, such as restoring and expanding the federal Section 48 CHP tax credit or eliminating unreasonable standby rates. And this deployment potential gap could also be addressed through incentives, which the Alliance is also exploring. We're currently drafting a proposal for a federal public-private partnership incentive program that would use $5 billion in federal support to leverage $20 billion in private sector investments to fund CHP projects, as well as other energy efficiency and demand response projects. And according to a DOE economic analysis, such a hypothetical public-private partnership could create up to 112,000 jobs and cut manufacturers' energy costs by over $36 billion over a 10-year period. And we think that such a program would be a great fit to be folded into the $1 trillion U.S. infrastructure package, which President Trump and others are developing. So with that, I am now pleased to bring our panelists into the discussion. Let's start by going around the panel. I'll ask each panelist to introduce themselves, say a few words about their organization, as well as a key takeaway that you draw from the Factbook data. And let's start with Gil.
Yes, this is Gil Amengual. I am the Director of Marketing for Solar Turbines. We're a large manufacturer of gas turbines in the 1 to 25 megawatt range. Our traditional markets have been both oil and gas and CHP. We have certainly have had a strong presence in the CHP market in the U.S. and internationally. I guess to me the most impressive fact is how even going back to chart 25 where you talk about the U.S. annual CHP build, how we saw a significant decline beginning in 2004, and how that decline just continued through the ensuing years. For many of you who might remember, that's the timing 2004-2005 is when you had a significant increase in the price of natural gas, and then shortly thereafter, a few years later, you were followed by the economic crisis, and then of course a weak economic return and really a lack of confidence in major capital investments. So I think that's really a lack of confidence in major capital investments. So I think that's a very telling chart and significant in light of all the different factors that played into the resulting drop in the implementation of CHP programs.
Absolutely. And I'll pass it on to Richard to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. This is Richard Meyer. I am a Director of Energy Analysis and Standards here at the American Gas Association. Thank you all for being here today on what is among the greatest days of sports and all of the March Madness, and I appreciate all your attention today as we talk about CHP and the Factbook in particular. AGA has been a proud sponsor of the Factbook the past 5 years, and we really see it as an asset in helping to communicate the value proposition of natural gas and natural gas combined heat and power as an energy efficiency solution for customers. Just a little bit about AGA. We represent the nation's investor-owned natural gas utilities. So these are the companies at the end of the line serving primarily residential, commercial, and industrial customers. Just a little bit about our position on combined heat and power. AGA does support federal and state policies that promote the expanded use of natural gas in homes and businesses, which includes CHP and distributed generation applications, again, to help provide consumers with energy-efficient solutions. We support regulatory acceptance of business models that better align the interests of customers, regulators, energy suppliers, and manufacturers of CHP systems. And we support policies that allow utilities to invest in natural gas CHP or allow utilities to finance CHP systems. We see this as a value proposition to customers. And speaking of customers, the one really large takeaway I'd echo from the Factbook this year, and Lisa mentioned it, was the low prices that consumers are paying. And if you look at just one data point in particular, commercial customers, on average across the country, last year in 2016, commercial customers, retail customers of natural gas, paid the lowest price for that gas in inflation-adjusted terms since 1976. That's since the Ford administration. So, again, as the natural gas resource base continues to be productive, we see declining prices, low and stable natural gas prices, as helping underscore the value of natural gas appliances and natural gas combined heat and power in particular to provide customers benefits.
Great. Thank you, Richard. Winnie, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Winnie Warner with the Chp Association. We're a trade association representing the CHP industry. Our members include equipment manufacturers, project developers, and utilities. Overall goal of finding ways to increase the deployment of CHP, whether through lobbying or education, which is a big part of what we do. I'd say one of the main conclusions that the association saw from the fact book was how CHP is fairly cost competitive with other clean energy technologies, which I believe we'll be talking about later, but how we've been looking a lot at how, outside of just that, how you can monetize the other benefits that CHP bring to the consumer and how that can add to the competitiveness of CHP.
Okay, great. So, as was mentioned a few times, based on Factbook data, CHP deployment levels have declined from 2014 to 2015, and at best have been flat for over a decade. Is this consistent with what you all are seeing in the marketplace? And if it is, what do you think are the reasons for this? I think maybe, Gil, can you get us started with that?
Yeah, we've certainly seen a decline in investments, as I indicated. We really go back even further than that. But if you're just looking at the most recent window of activity, we've seen pretty strong continued interest by colleges and universities. And some institutions like hospitals and healthcare. So we've seen a decline, but we haven't seen as much of a decline in those areas as we've seen in others. Where we see the biggest impact has been in the industrial sectors. Where I think number one, we have lost some of the incentives over time that were generating interest in employment of CHP type solutions. But I think also you've been seeing a time when you've had relatively stable electricity rates, if not relatively low continued electricity rates, and people have been, I think there's been a concern with making significant investments during a weak economic activity period. I think until people would be comfortable with seeing a strong or far more pronounced economic recovery, I think there was a lot of reluctance to make investments in CHP type systems. So, again, we're very sensitive towards being able to recover your investments within reasonably short periods. And if you're not sure about where the market's going in that time frame for your products, you're very reluctant to take and make major investments in your operations.
Thank you. And there's tremendous regional variability in the openness to CHP across the U.S. Why do you think that is, and how can that change? Winnie, what are your thoughts on that?
So a lot of our members have been active in California, and Gil can talk about this as well, about specifically within that region, we've seen issues with them being extremely preferential to renewables. So CHP has had more issues there. Then we've seen more favor towards CHP within areas like New York with their REV. So I think a lot of the decrease in deployment we are looking at more on a regional level based on their kind of views on CHP and the direction they want their energy to go in.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about natural gas. The fact book shows that U.S. natural gas net exports have been trending up since 2011, due in part to growing exports to Mexico, also in part to liquefied natural gas exports. How is the outlook for U.S. natural gas prices affected by the potential for these increased exports? And what does that mean for CHP and other large volume customers of natural gas? And I will throw this one to Richard.
Thanks. That's a great question, and it's probably important to step back and look at where we've been in recent history. As this fact book and in prior years, the fact book has noted continued record years of U.S. natural gas production and consumption. Last year was not a record year for the whole year, although the month of February of 2016 was a record year for natural gas production. The prior years had been records, however. So production has slowed down a little bit, a result of low natural gas commodity prices. Consumption, on the other hand, was an all-time record last year, driven in large part by volumes delivered to power generation and the growth of exports. We're seeing more pipeline capacity and therefore ability to send volumes of gas south of the border, so pipeline exports to Mexico. And 2016 noted the very first exports of liquefied natural gas from terminals in Louisiana, the Sabine Pass facility in particular. And we anticipate those to grow. I think one fear that some customers have voiced is, well, what will happen to prices? Won't these exports leave us exposed to prices elsewhere in the world? Won't it just drive up consumption and therefore price? And what does that do for natural gas end use technologies? Does that hurt the value? And my response to that is one where recognizing just how productive the U.S. natural gas resource base is and can be, and looking at where it's being produced versus where gas is being consumed. And really what we've seen over the past year was that exports provided a stabilizing effect on natural gas prices. And we see that, you know, exports still being a relatively small part of demand and will continue to be relative to end uses in other sectors, providing a stable level of demand that helps overall market stability. And part of the value proposition that low gas prices have, it's not just the low gas prices, but it's stable, relatively predictable gas prices. And I think that stability has been evident in the marketplace for really the last 7-8 years now, and certainly in more recent history. So we see this as a component of a stable marketplace, and one where natural gas will continue to provide, underscore that value proposition for customers that seek to use applications like combined heat and power.
So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how low natural gas prices could relate to CHP deployments. On the one hand, low gas prices may support deployment since the vast majority of systems run on natural gas, but however, maybe low prices discourage efficiency investments. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I'll just say, I'll pick up on that real quick. You know, certainly low and stable prices are good for, gas-using appliances and CHP. And as everyone is aware, it's that spread between natural gas prices and electricity that largely drives many of the economic decisions whether to install CHP. So that, in turn, contributes to some of the regional variability that we were talking about earlier. Also, low natural gas prices contributes to lower electricity prices insofar that natural gas prices helps establish the marginal price for electricity. So there's some complicated market dynamics there that we need to wrap our arms around. But again, we just to reinforce that idea of stability, that's where we see the market headed for the medium and even long term.
Yeah, this is Gil. I'd like to first of all, I agree with all the comments that or perspectives that Richard had on that interplay. It is very complex. when you're looking at, first of all, you fundamentally have to look at why you're evaluating CHP for an application to begin with, and it's the fact that you need both heat and power, and generally speaking, that's done with multiple sources or multiple uses of that natural gas. Frequently, that's the grid and a boiler, but CHP has the advantage of providing it all at higher efficiency and lower carbon footprint. So when you're talking about a new build, it may favor a CHP right at the outset because it's easier. You don't have anything there. When you're looking at conversions, it may depend upon whether or not you're converting from an old coal-fired system to CHP based on natural gas, or if you're converting from a pre-existing natural gas combination. So there, and all those different situations play into or take into account conversion costs versus new build versus prices of electricity and natural gas, and trying to achieve the greatest amount of efficiency. Generally speaking, if you already have a system and you don't have any major driver to make a change, then you may be more reluctant to make that investment because of the low natural gas prices, unless it's coal and you want to change your footprint. So there are a lot of different factors that go into the decision-making process, and the fact that you have low natural gas prices may or may not necessarily sway the day in that decision.
Great, thank you. I want to talk a little bit more about the cost of CHP. As Lisa mentioned, the fact book shows that CHP is competitive with other clean energy sources. The numbers suggest that the relative cost of CHP to other energy sources is rising. And is this consistent with what you are seeing? And what does this mean for deployment trends going forward? I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. We'll bring Winnie into it.
I think the first point we try to make at the association, especially is when we kind of get bundled in with the clean energy sources, are we clean or not? Because some people consider us clean, some people, because we use natural gas, are considering us clean, so it's hard to compete on that level if your customers are wanting clean energy overall. I know Duke Energy is had plans to have a project at Duke University recently, all set up to go for a CHP plant that has been put on halt under protest from students and faculty over whether it's truly clean or not. So I think we have trouble competing in that sense, kind of being bundled together with clean energy sources sometimes and not. The main difference we try to go for is the kind of resiliency aspect of CHP and how that can add to kind of the cost effectiveness of having a CHP system over less reliable systems that might be a little more competitive on the base cost, but over time could save you more money.
Mm-hmm. And Gil, do you have any thoughts on how this fact that CHP is competitive with other sources as stated in the fact book, what that means for deployment trends going forward?
Yeah, again, we have we certainly see continued activity on the part of customers that are very interested in, number one, reducing their carbon footprint, and or having to expand or install new CHP systems. There are plenty of customers that where there's really no substitute for a system that is capable of both producing heat and producing electricity. As a matter of fact, many of our, the systems are installed based upon sizing generally the heat load that's required, not the electrical load necessarily. That ends up being secondary to the decision-making process, and that's usually not something that you're going to be able to do with renewable-based systems, although we do have a number of our systems installed in facilities that have incorporated microgrids that are able to take advantage of both renewables and CHP systems, where the CHP system becomes a base load component to their load needs and steam needs and the like. But then the renewable component can be satisfied by a combination of solar and storage. So customers are learning to, excuse me, customers are learning to optimize around solutions that will give them the best carbon footprint, but at the same time take advantage of the fact that CHP is the only efficient way of delivering both heat and power.
Thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit about infrastructure. Modernizing and expanding our country's pipeline infrastructure has become a hot topic. Richard, can you speak to what advances are being made, how quickly it's happening, and what are the challenges?
Sure. The idea of expanded infrastructure works in two ways. One, you need to expand infrastructure in order to bring supplies to customers, and where there are constraints for getting those supplies to customers, expanded pipeline access is a hugely important priority. I think about the Northeast in particular, really, and other areas that are at the end of the line, that as increased use of natural gas puts pressure on capacity, new projects are going to be needed in order to pressure on capacity. New projects are going to be needed in order to serve that growing use and changing use for that matter. But also you need to bring gas supplies out of regions that are producing, and in some cases producing so fast that you really can't build enough, that you can't build the infrastructure fast enough. So for example, the Appalachian region, so of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, just as an example, that's home to the Utica and Marcellus shale plays, and these three states currently provide 22 billion cubic feet of gas per day. That's out of the 70 that we produce nationwide. And there's only about 22.5 billion cubic feet per day of pipeline capacity there. So what we actually see, and this is data from Bloomberg that put together this fact book, what they see is that many pipeline projects are underway, and that an additional 16 BCF of gas, that's like an 80% increase of capacity out of the Appalachian region, are to be expected. So the market is addressing these issues. We continue to focus at AGA on permit streamlining, other areas to help the market continue to build and react to these things. Two quick issues that I think we're looking at going ahead. One, political opposition. This is both from landholders and environmental groups that are opposed to fossil fuel infrastructure, and that can delay or ultimately shut down some pipeline projects. So we're working to continue to educate the public and other stakeholders about the need and role of natural gas infrastructure in serving customers and ensuring that price stability that I was talking about. The other piece is the Trump administration and the proposed, or really not yet proposed, but anticipated infrastructure bill that will be coming down the way. And really I can't say anything about it because there's nothing really to react to yet. But acknowledging how much the marketplace is already working to expand infrastructure, we're going to be keen on understanding how this infrastructure bill will interact with those activities already underway through our companies and others to expand our natural gas infrastructure base.
Thank you. And speaking of the administration advocating for the infrastructure proposal, I want to get some thoughts from the rest of the panel on how you see natural gas and CHP potentially fitting into this infrastructure proposal. I mentioned in my slide, the Alliance is drafting a proposal for a public-private incentive program that could be folded nicely into that infrastructure proposal. But what are your thoughts? If I could start with Richard again.
Sure, and again, we recognize that in large part it hasn't been the constraints have in building infrastructure have been both process and political, and those two things interact with each other. So I guess I don't have a lot to say on the kind of public-private partnership yet, without some anything firm to react to. But recognizing, I would suggest that we need to evaluate how much we really need that for the gas infrastructure system versus maybe other areas of U.S. infrastructure that need addressing, roads and bridges and so on and so forth. So again, we're fairly I want to say bullish on certain pipeline projects and the ability for the market to respond to changes in supply and demand, moving gas from where it's produced to where it's consumed. But noting there are some very real constraints out there. And insofar that this infrastructure proposal helps address those constraints, especially on natural gas pipelines, we're going to be very interested in working with the administration.
Great, thank you. So it looks like we have about 7 minutes left. I want to get a chance for us to take some audience questions as well. As a reminder, if you have a question, please click on the Q&A button at the top of your screen, and you can just type it in there. I will give the floor to Andy, who will read off the questions. But I want to thank our panel and hand off to you, Andy.
Thanks, Alex. So our first question, I will throw it out to anyone who wants to answer it. Where do you predict CHP will be in 2050? And I'll tack on to that. What do you see as the biggest factor in CHP going forward, either in limiting it or enabling its growth?
This is Richard. I have no idea what anything will be in 2050, so I won't venture a guess as to that timeline. And not to be glib, I really don't know. I think the energy system is changing so rapidly in so many areas that predicting things 10 years out becomes very much a challenge. I mean, try imagining, 10 years ago what natural gas was going to look like, and everyone got it wrong, the bulls and the bears. So in terms of kind of the near term and what will affect the market, one area that we are working on is the federal investment tax credit and getting it back onto the books. I believe it expired at the end of last year, and there were a series of technologies, including combined heat and power and fuel cells, that did not receive extensions to the federal tax credit as the wind and solar and some of those technologies did. So looking for parity in that space and recognizing how important that tax credit is for many CHP projects and the continued development of this market. So that's just one point of a question mark as to future market development and a lever that might be pulled to help push more CHP deployment.
Thanks. Gil or Winnie, anything to add to that?
No, if I try to predict what's going to happen by 2050, I'd either be wrong or lucky. So either way, I don't think it's of much value right now.
Okay. One more question here. So CHP is often not well understood compared to other technologies like wind and solar. What can be done to close this information gap? Why don't I turn it over to Winnie?
This is something we try to work a lot on, and is one of our biggest barriers is just the general knowledge and then obviously understanding of CHP. We work a lot on trying to just get even awareness on the Hill. I think overall, just the more we get out there, I think our biggest barrier tends to be the availability of data and stuff like the fact that is great for us, because if we have the data to show and prove this is how many jobs it creates, or this is cost savings you can get, this is how many emissions it saves. That's really great, and the more we can get more of that data, more studies like that out there would really help with the understanding of CHP and trying to get it more in the mainstream of things.
Let's see, Gil or Richard, any thoughts on the information gap and maybe how it might translate to CHP in terms of policy?
Well, this is Gil. I guess I share Winnie's comments. This is a never-ending process to continue the education process. We run into this quite a bit, in particular at universities, where sometimes they get it and sometimes they don't, and I'm talking about the general population, and all they see is the issue of a fossil fuel, and they reel back until they understand the real contribution in efficiency and the contribution that CHP has in terms of carbon footprint. So one of the things we're doing more of is using social media as a mechanism to take and do some training. We're doing training with the Army Corps of Engineers. We do training with a variety of different customer groups. But it is a process that doesn't end, and I think it's rooted in really the term fossil fuel, where everything gets bunched into the same category, into the same mix, and there's relatively little understanding of the impact of efficiency, the impact of the different carbon footprints of the different fuels that are involved, and really how quickly you can transition the economics and the infrastructure associated with renewables and other fuels, so that you can really have a reliable low carbon footprint infrastructure and reliable infrastructure. And I don't think people really understand the role that CHP plays in all of that, and I think it's just going to have to be a continued education process, both of the people, the users, and also the regulators who have to who dictate the policies that can result in either promoting or reducing the amount of CHP that's implemented.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. What policies could help increase deployment in the states and nationally going forward? Maybe if we turn our attention to maybe model states out there that have very healthy policy environments. Richard, do you have any thoughts?
I think, at the risk of calling out any one state over another, I think I'm going to demur on that particular point of question. But again, for all states, the federal investment tax credit is key to helping keep CHP projects going. So that's very much the focus on our radar right now.
Okay. Are there any state policies in particular that are crucial?
This is Winnie. I think what we are hearing more and more is more utility policies, how those can be prohibitive to our members and those trying to deploy CHP, trying to figure out better ways to do the interconnection standards and stuff like that. So right now, a lot of the concern we're hearing is stuff like the ITC, and then very specifically to utility barriers.
Although let me just add on to that. I see that changing with Florida Power or Chesapeake in Florida, and with Duke Energy, and I think there is more of an interest by utilities in seeing this as a potential growth path for generation in their district. So I think they're all monitoring what's going on in that area, and I think the utility policy may be something that will hopefully change over time, and we'll find them more in favor of it than they have been opposing it.
I think that goes.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
I think that even goes back to the whole education, kind of getting information out there. I think a lot of utilities kind of dismiss it quickly, and if we can get those case studies out there with those utilities are mentioning that it works and that it can be good for you, that the more we get that out there, then that would really help with other utilities to get the ball rolling.
Great. Well, it looks like we're a couple minutes over, so we'll stop there. That concludes our webinar today. Thank you again to Lisa Jacobson, Dale Lauda, Gil Amengal, Richard Meyer, and Winnie Werner, and also our sponsors, the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, the Chp Association, and the Alliance for Industrial Efficiency. Materials and a recording from today's webinar will be made available to attendees in a few days. Thank you, everyone.